So we'll have Tyson Fury versus Oleksandr Usyk on May the 18th. And today I'm joined by Joey Knight.
How you doing, mate? All right?
I'm good, mate. We've got Misfits' next big star here, so I'm very excited about your career at the moment.
I appreciate that, mate. I'm glad to be on the channel. I've seen all the content, the consistency. You're smashing it, mate. So very happy for you.
Yeah, I'm trying, mate. I'm putting in that work because you know how it is trying to juggle your own boxing training and then, you know, trying to upload and stuff. It's difficult. So let's get straight into it. So how do you think Tyson Fury's looking?
Do you know what? It's hard with Tyson Fury because anyone that's followed his career the whole way through will know that you've always got to take everything Tyson Fury says, everything he does, everything he puts out with a pinch of salt, haven't you?
Absolutely.
Over the years, there's been so many examples of when he said one thing and done another. However, in the way that he approaches fights, I would actually argue more often than not, what you see is what you get. I remember the second Deontay Wilder fight. The whole time he had said, I'm going to walk across the ring. This is going to be a 5-round job, 6-round job, whatever it was. I'm going to get him out of there. I'm going to knock him out. And I remember at the time thinking, you've just been dropped twice in the first fight between the two. And because of that, I feel like you're double bluffing here and you're actually going to be a bit more cautious of Deontay Wilder's power. And then the way the fight unfolded, it turned out that he'd been telling the truth all along. So now when we're seeing Tyson Fury posting videos of him, what seems like he's, you know, light on his feet, a little bit more fleet-footed, a little bit more looking to score points. Now we're seeing that. I'm having to scratch my head and to try and work out whether or not I believe that this is a bluff and he's actually going to go in there and do what a lot of us are sort of, I don't want to say hoping he does, but a lot of us are sort of anticipating he needs to do to be successful in this fight, and that is use every inch of that 6'9" frame, every bit of width of that frame, really put it on Usyk. If I'm completely honest, and it's probably not the answer you want to hear, I don't know, mate. I don't know until that first bell rings what to expect from Tyson Fury stylistically and in the way he approaches the fight. What about you? What have you thought from his training footage that you've seen?
Yeah, so like you say, he's a very difficult man to read, but, you know, like you say, most of the time, you know, despite what he says or does, he gets the job done. He's unbeaten, so it's hard to kind of argue with him, but I just think there's been so much inactivity over the recent years. He's been in and out the ring, and even, you know, we can't not forget his most recent performance against Francis Ngannou. But at the same time, I'm not going to read too much into that because, you know, you're only as good as your last fight. So at this point in time, of course, we're judging him on that fight. But at the same time, he still won regardless. On a bad day, he got the job done. And I do think it was the real kick up the backside that he needed, to be honest, because I think, and even the fact that this fight's now been delayed, I think it's been perfect because if he had went straight into that fight with Oleksandr Usyk, then I wouldn't have given much of a chance, but now he's had more time to kind of fully get focused and get his mind on the job, and you know, more time to prepare. And I know we've got to mention the cut that he suffered in his training camp, which again would have affected his training, but he's had some time for that to heal. And I can imagine, you know, he's got the best guys in the game. You know, he knows how to kind of get round it. He probably was wearing special head guards, and you know, there's still loads you can get out of training, body sparring and things like that. I'm not saying it's as good as real sparring, but you know, like I say, I just think that right now, I think he's really taking it seriously. I think that fight with Francis Ngannou, you know, really got his mind on the job, and I think he's the type of guy that needs like a really big name to really get him up. And I think it doesn't get any bigger than Oleksandr Usyk, so I think he's really serious about the job this time. And in fairness, he's looking in great shape. And even leading up to the date that it was meant to happen, you could still see that he'd lost a lot of weight and he was looking well. And from what I've seen recently, he's still looking pretty good. So
do you know what I've been wanting to ask you, right? So the footage that we saw where Tyson Fury apparently suffers the cut, it looked like it was filmed on an old Nokia 3210 or something like that. It was so grainy and whatnot. That footage has come underneath a magnifying glass pretty often, right? And I've seen a lot of people online, even like, you know, quite credible sort of YouTube channels and stuff that I watch quite often, speaking about that bit of footage and saying that although a lot of people don't doubt that Tyson Fury has got a cut, it has opened up. We've seen the stitching in it when he went to the press conference next time round, or did the press call with Turki Al-Sheikh. But a lot of people have said that they don't believe that that is the original footage where the cut was done. And obviously, you're the expert here. I'm guessing throughout pretty much all of your career, whenever you've been sparring in the build-up to fights, especially when you've been sparring at a good level, especially if you were in a camp training for the biggest fight of your life like Tyson Fury is, are you getting cut wearing a headguard? Because the chances are pretty minimal, aren't they?
You know, going off that, I've touched wood. I've never actually been cut myself, but I have been in the gym when a guy's been wearing a full face head guard. You know, the nose head guard.
Yeah.
And I've seen someone get cut through that.
Okay.
Cuts definitely happen with head guards. And you know, you're talking about heavyweights, big punchers, and them kind of cheek head guards. What he was wearing, you know, they only protect a certain amount of your face, so can still get cut. The simple fact is, we'll never know for definite. That's the top and bottom of it all, you know. But I have seen in training camps people get cut with head guards with 16-ounce gloves. So the simple fact is, it definitely can happen.
Do you know what sort of sways me a little bit on it? Which, again, if I didn't know what I'm about to say now, I probably wouldn't have doubted it myself. But obviously, watching a lot of Tyson Fury, as I have done, you know, throughout his whole career, I remember early on I remember seeing some footage of him in Peter Fury's gym and he's sparring without a head guard. And then I remember seeing another bit of footage and someone was saying to him, and he said, I don't wear head guards. He said, I don't wear head guards. He said, they're more, you know, they do more damage than they do good. And part of me sort of sometimes agrees with it. I think, yeah, in certain spars, I'd probably get clipped by punches that if I didn't have a head guard on, there's no way that punch is hitting me. But the couple of inches extra, maybe the little bit more sense of security I have in being able to absorb a shot on the head, maybe might make me a little bit neglectful when it comes to my defence. And being that Tyson Fury is a fighter that, especially going back to his style under sort of Peter Fury, was very elusive. It made you miss by small margins. I was a little bit unsure when I saw it, but obviously your story there about seeing someone with a full face headguard get cut probably clears that up for a few people who are wondering how does it happen with a headguard on.
Yeah, it's surprising how the glove can, you know, it's one of those things. I always use the example of like when you're a kid and people, you see them throwing stones at windows, throwing them, and all of a sudden you might hit that stone at just a certain spot and the window shatters.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. And it's the same with a head guard. You know, you might get hit 1,000 times with a punch, and that one time might just hit in a certain angle, and you know, somehow the knuckle gets through. And you know, sometimes head guards can also, when the head guard's attached to your head, just the simple friction of the head guard like pulling your skin can also tear the skin and cause a cut. So definitely believe that a punch, well, I've witnessed it with my own eyes, it can cause a cut. And with regards to what you're saying about you know, Tyson Fury not wearing a head guard, I used to always think that was absolutely crazy, and because especially I was in a camp with Carl Froch when I was on GB, and he used to always wear a full face head guard, and he was the reason that I bought a full face head guard, because he said, especially when you turn pro, these fights are worth thousands, and you know, in some cases millions for some guys. So if you get an injury, a little cut, that's you out of pocket. So you've got to look after yourself in a training camp. You do everything all cost not to get cut. And for the sake of, like you say, you know, maybe the odd shot you might get through, you might get hit a little bit more. I know some guys, almost especially with them full face head guards, they get so reliant and feel protected that they kind of neglect the defense and can cause bad habits. But you've just got, like, you know, me as a professional fighter myself, you've just got to make sure when you're wearing that head guard, you know, you imagine that you're not wearing it, and you stick to you've got to keep to your defense. Don't let it become like a lazy thing where you, like I say, you're letting yourself get hit. And yeah, like Tyson Fury's in big fights, and you think the amount of money that's involved, that he should be wearing a big full face head guard, because there's millions at stake. Not just the money he loses, but what about all the people that buy tickets, buy hotels and flights to get to Dubai and stuff like that? So to get to Saudi Arabia, should I say? Not just for yourself, for other people, you should protect yourself to make sure that you can turn up on fight night.
I think one of the problems, right, and it's a bit like the boy who cried wolf, isn't it? One of the problems is if this injury was to happen to Anthony Joshua, no one questions it. The fact it's if it happens to Usyk, no one questions it. The fact it's Tyson Fury and there's a track record there of people having sort of uncertainty around parts of Tyson Fury's career, incidents that have happened, I think that's why it sort of raises the question. But I'd agree with you. I don't think there is any wrongdoing there, any controversy, but it's probably worth just noting it, isn't it?
No, absolutely. Unfortunately, when you are that guy who does all the talk and the trash talk and you're calling everyone a dosser, people love when things go wrong for you. And, you know, they're deliberately going to jump on the bandwagon of, oh, yeah, he's pulling out, you know, he's cut himself. And like I say, we'll never actually know, but I can also understand why people are making these accusations. So it's kind of his own fault. But, and also with regards to, like we're saying, I mentioned about the delay. Do you think this delay has actually benefited him, like the fight being put back?
Yeah, I don't see how it couldn't have benefited Tyson Fury to have the delay, to have the fight put back. Tyson Fury clearly wasn't going to be ready for the December date. I think they were. What were they looking at? December 17th or the 18th, something like that. I can't quite remember.
Rings a bell.
But they were looking at the December date, and obviously, you know, we were sat round the table on the Pain Game watching for the live stream of the Tyson Fury Francis Ngannou fight. Obviously, once that fight happened, we knew that it was going to be delayed. It was going to be pushed back. And when they came out with I think it was the February date. I think it was the start of February. When they came out with that date, I remember thinking, God, like, you know, there's a little bit of time for Tyson Fury to get ready again. But what Tyson Fury was anticipating was going in and having a fight with Francis Ngannou, very much like Anthony Joshua's fight with Francis Ngannou. So if you're Anthony Joshua, you have that fight with Ngannou, yeah, you probably can fight again in 6 to 8 weeks. Maybe that's a bit of a push, not 6 or 8, but maybe 12 weeks you can go again, right?
Yeah.
If you've just come through a 10-round, I'm not going to call it a war, because I think a lot of people look back on that Tyson Fury Francis Ngannou fight and they look at it with the emotion still attached to it. And I think the emotion, for me personally, I can't speak for anyone else. Everyone looks at stuff different. Boxing's subjective. For me, if you detach the emotion, I would say that, okay, you know, the occasion and everything that goes into it, the story of this guy's never laced up a pair of boxing gloves, make the performance of Ngannou all that more impressive. But I still scored it to Tyson Fury by 3 points, and that is including the knockdown round with Francis Ngannou. So, although I don't think it was the fight that many people have portrayed since, I still think that it was a tough enough fight for Tyson Fury that he did need to take the time to recoup. Then he goes into camp, right? And the stories, and listen, sparring stories, rumours around camp, they're always rife, and a lot of the time they can be true, a lot of the time they're not true. The stories were that the camp wasn't going that well for Tyson Fury. I think a lot of the camp was focusing on getting the weight down, and he was combining the sort of training for Usyk with the training just to get to a sufficient weight that he would want to be. Once he got to the weight, then I think that if you had said to him, right, no cut involved, do you want another 4 or 5 weeks to train for this fight? I think he would have said yes. Do you want another 12 weeks to train for this fight? I think then maybe you're looking at it and going, nah, you know, I want to get in there and get it done. So I don't think it's ideal for Tyson Fury. I don't think he would have chosen extra 12 weeks. But I think it's somewhere in the middle, because I think come the end of that camp on the February date that it was initially scheduled for, I think if you had said to him at that point, do you want another 6 weeks? I think he would have said yeah, to be honest. But that's just my guess. What do you think?
No, do you know what it is? I think you've nailed it. I think mentally coming out of the Ngannou fight, if he didn't realise beforehand, like, you know, he knew after that fight that he's not physically in the right place and also mentally. And that's the mistake a lot of fighters, you know, this is a bit of example to all professional fighters, athletes in general. It's about being consistent, especially in boxing where making weight, I know he's a heavyweight and you don't have to be on an exact weight, but even heavyweights know what their optimum weight is for fighting. And I think he let his weight go so badly that when he come back into camp, it was about making weight and not about focusing on actual tactics and like the technical side. And a lot of fighters make that mistake where they're basically spending the majority of their fight camps getting the weight down rather than focusing on their opponent and the tactics that they need. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's totally benefited him to an extent. But the fact that it's ended up being a little bit longer overcooking the chicken, if you know what I mean. I think he's ready to go like weeks ago, really. I think he would have benefited the fight being roundabout now, really. But unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. Regardless, I think it's been more beneficial than not. So yeah, it's an
I
interesting
think
one.
like getting to the destination doesn't mean you're acclimatized to the destination. You might get out to a nice hot country, but that doesn't mean you can take the heat on day one. You're going to sunburn, you know? And I feel the analogy I'm trying to use here is, yeah, Tyson Fury would have got down to the weight that he wanted to be to fight Usyk, but he wouldn't have been comfortable at that weight. I feel like he might have needed a few more weeks. Personally, I'm a fighter that cuts weight, right? I'm not saying Tyson Fury doesn't, but a heavyweight is not as important. I know that I probably don't want to cut the weight until the day of the weigh-in or the day before or whatever, because for all my heavy training, my sprints, my sparring, all the stuff that's wear and tear on the body, I want that extra 4, 5, 6 pounds on me at that time, just to give me a little bit more of what I need. And because it's not too much, I can then cut it just before. I'll rehydrate, I'm going to be fine. With Tyson Fury, I do feel like he would want to have sparring sessions at his sort of optimum weight to see, right, these are the things, because when you're a big man like that, little steps of the feet, little maneuvers, bits of footwork, for example, even bits of elusive defensive movement, the difference between half a stone can be quite vast, and moves that you couldn't pull off half a stone or a stone heavier, you can. So you might need to be at that weight a little bit in camp to sort of maneuver yourself.
Absolutely, because we're touching on the weight, but forgetting the weight, the weight is almost an indication of actually how fit you actually are. The fact is that he's carrying weight is an instant suggestion that he hasn't been, or he's been missing some parts of his training, whether it's, not doing as much running, or the intensity hasn't quite been the same. So yeah, like the weight is a definite indicator. Because I know straight away fighters go, oh, he's 2 pounds over, 4 pounds over. They're focusing on the actual weight, but as you know, as like a fighter yourself, it's actually, when you get to a certain weight and you've done a certain amount of work beforehand to get yourself to that level of weight. And it's interesting you mentioned there about you like to be a certain weight in camp. And I know exactly what you mean there, because if you get your weight down too early for some people, and this is all, individual, but for me, sometimes if I bring it down too early, I feel weak in camp, start to get injuries, I start getting coughs and colds. So like, the right time for your body when you need to bring the weight down. But yeah, this is all subjective, but I think the fact is when it comes to Tyson Fury, we're seeing how he performed. So it was evidential that he wasn't ready, and he wasn't ready for, as you used the analogy of the heat, he wasn't ready for that level of heat. He was also very unlucky that he was in there with a guy that nobody really knew how he was in the boxing ring. Yes, we knew he was a great MMA fighter. So he was quite unlucky, really, because he was the test dummy, really. And we now know how good Francis Ngannou is, and then it was a lot easier for Anthony Joshua to go in there, deal with him, and as we're seeing, wipe him out. So I think everyone has been quite harsh on Tyson Fury, myself included. I just think it's when you're an athlete, you're meant to be like one of the best in the world. You should have been cutting corners, regardless who your opponent is. You get yourself prepared. So I think that's just more of a mistake on his behalf. But yeah, he probably wasn't as professional as he should have been.
When you say about people sort of being harsh on Tyson Fury, there, can you remember a time? And I'm not saying it's not deserved. Like, I completely understand it. Like I said earlier in the conversation, I followed Tyson Fury since his pro debut. I think I remember sort of hearing about Tyson Fury as an amateur, to be honest, right? But definitely since his pro debut, I think it was on a Mick Hennessy show, maybe. And I've always watched him, and because of that, I've got a good sort of idea for, the characteristics he has and things like that. And because of that, I'm able to take everything he says with a pinch of salt. Like I said at the start, many people aren't able to take what he says with a pinch of salt. So I can understand that he's almost made a rod for his own back at times, where now the public perception is starting to shift on him. It's starting to change. Going into the Deontay Wilder first fight, he's on the comeback trail, right? Going into that fight, his public perception was at an all-time high. Everyone was loving the. Sorry, mate, I'm on a main road here. Everyone was loving the Tyson Fury story, right? Going into the rematch, everyone again was really, really Team Fury. Even I was at the Dillian White fight at Wembley Stadium. Again, everyone's still riding the hype train of Tyson Fury. But because of the broken down negotiations of Oleksandr Usyk, and obviously the broken down negotiations trying to sort out a fight of Anthony Joshua, the tide's starting to turn. And I think that now we're seeing a more split public rather than ever, where it's 50-50. Some people will still acknowledge, okay, this is sort of, in my opinion, the man of this heavyweight era. And until someone dethrones him, then I don't think it's fair to really jump on the bandwagon and criticise him all that much. And some people are different. Do you think that the public perception swinging on Tyson Fury could affect his performance in any way, whether that be negatively or positively?
That's an interesting one. Tyson Fury's like a tough man. He's got thick skin. So I can't imagine the public's perception will have too much of an impact. But at the same time, you get used to when people start to get on your side and you kind of, you get accustomed to that. So I definitely think it'll play some part because, this is boxing, there's all different type of pressures. And I think, like you say, he's made a rod for his own back. And, this fight is such a big fight. And like, he's made such a big thing that he's a small man, Oleksandr Usyk, and little men can't beat a big good guy. So really, he's put the pressure on his own back. So I do think that he'll be taking this fight so seriously, and he knows to lose, game over, because, like I say, he's made the rod for his own back. So I definitely think he'll be feeling the pressure.
What did you think of the comparisons he made when he said about little men not beating big guys? Because obviously, Evander Holyfield was one of the names that he listed in there, and Evander Holyfield did beat big guys. He beat very, very good big guys.
I didn't agree with that at all. It's happened time and time again, and using Evander Holyfield as an example, I think he's one of the best all-time heavyweights, to go from cruiserweight up to heavyweight. I mean, he beat Riddick Bowe once, they fought 3 times, so he did beat a great fighter in Riddick Bowe. And, he got beat against the first fight. I think that was very debatable, the first result. And then I think, because it was a draw the first fight, wasn't it? And then the second fight, they give it to Lennox Lewis. And even then, it was a very close fight. And we're talking about, for me, Lennox Lewis was one of the best ever as a heavyweight, because I think he would have lived with any era, because he was he was a giant of a man. He was powerful. He was strong. He could box. He had one of the best jabs. I think his jab and his right hand was one of the best in boxing history. Despite the fact that he lost against him, he gave him a really tough test. And not many fighters give Lennox Lewis, as tough test as Evander Holyfield did, to fight him 2 times and to give him such a difficult fight. So I totally disagree with that argument. Tyson Fury, he's the guy of this era. So naturally, it's up to him when people start naming other fighters. And, he's got to try to protect his own legacy. So he's going to come up with these different analogies to kind of, to justify where he thinks he is. And of course, it's all a little bit psychology, because he's a fighter. He wants to think that he can beat any man that's put in front of him, because he's unbeaten. He's not used to being beaten. So he's going to create arguments. We'll all do this as fighters. I've done it myself. All of us fighters are a little bit delusional, you know what I mean? We convince ourselves that we can beat anyone that's put in front of us. Because if you want to be a winner, you've got to think that way. So again, as a fighter myself, you know the same. You take things like this with a pinch of salt. But you can easily get too deep into the conversation. But realistically, he's trying to convince himself and the public. Whether he fully believes it when he's behind closed doors is irrelevant, really. But it is interesting. What was your thoughts on that?
I don't know. As I say, obviously, the Evander Holyfield sort of comparison, I didn't agree at all with. He then spoke about Thomas Adamek. I mean, Thomas Adamek, he boxed for a world title at light heavyweight, so it's a bit of a difference, It's not a cruiserweight who in sort of today's era might even campaign at the bridgerweight, the new weight that's been introduced. You were talking about a smaller guy there. Ultimately, though, comparisons, I don't really think mean anything. I honestly don't think they mean absolutely anything at all. And the sort of best way we could look at this is by even looking at Tyson Fury's career. If you look at Tyson Fury, one of Tyson Fury's hardest fights of recent years was against Otto Wallin, right?
Yeah.
And he had a really, really hard fight against Otto Wallin. And a lot of people are now going, well, you see how he fared with a smaller southpaw. Otto Wallin really gave him a lot of trouble, and Usyk's a lot better than Otto Wallin, but he's a southpaw. I don't necessarily read into that. You could have looked at Anthony Joshua against Otto Wallin, and you could have gone, and to be fair, I think maybe scratching my memory, this was one of the points that I was making in the build up to that fight, because I gave Otto Wallin more of a chance than clearly I should have done after the fight had played out. But you could look at Anthony Joshua against Oleksandr Usyk, and then when he was coming into the Otto Wallin fight, you could go, well, Anthony Joshua was never able to hit Oleksandr Usyk with more than 2 unanswered punches. And does that mean that he'll struggle to find the target on Otto Wallin? And ultimately, he didn't struggle to find a target on him at all. So I think that the comparisons, they're always relevant, because ultimately, no matter whether you're someone who does a bit of boxing like me, or you're someone who's dedicated your whole life to it like you, or you're Freddie Roach or Emmanuel Stewart or whoever you want to be, none of us know until it gets in there and it plays out in front of us how things are going to go. So although we try and draw reference and cling on to things and make comparisons, ultimately, although it's fun to talk about, no one finds out until they get in there and it happens anyway.
Like you say, until the fight happens, all we're doing is trying to collect as much data as we can to try to, summarize the potential outcome. But especially in boxing, the maths don't add up. Styles make fights, so there's no guarantees on anything. One punch in boxing changes the whole fight, because if you're playing football and someone scores a goal, you've got a chance to get that goal back. But in boxing, you get knocked out, it's game over. When you get hit with a hard punch and you're rocked, that punch can stay with you for rounds, or even through the whole fight. You can still not be fully recovered. So boxing's one of them sports. We're all just trying to guess. Basically, it's a guessing game until the fight actually plays out. Styles make fights, so it's a really, really interesting one. What did you think of the way Tyson Fury was in that recent press conference? I think it was a couple of weeks ago. How did you think his whole persona, his attitude? He seemed quite different to me.
I thought the press conference was a bit of a weird one, to be honest. I don't really know why they did it.
No.
If I had to put my money on it, from a psychological point of view, I would say that Tyson Fury is training very, very hard. I think he's putting everything, leaving no stone unturned in this camp. And I believe that camp started to feel a bit like Groundhog Day for Tyson Fury. I believe that he was probably going in, seeing the same faces, training in the same places, and he just needed something to break things up a little bit. And at the time of probably a conversation behind closed doors that happened where he was saying, it's getting a bit repetitive and whatever, they thought, right, okay, I'll tell you what we do. We'll round up the cavalry, we'll get them all to Morecambe, and we'll put on a bit of media day and get the juices flowing ever so slightly. I could be wrong, but that was just my sort of my perception on that.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think there was a little bit of that, but I think the general public, the casual fans, I think they needed to kind of, get a bit more hype and kind of get it out there, because I think a lot of people are I think the fights took that long to happen. I think people have kind of fell asleep a little bit on it. I think not everybody, like I say, but the casual fans, I think they needed to remind everyone that this fight is happening. It's like one of the biggest fights to happen, in centuries. You know what I mean? This is the undisputed heavyweight title. I think they just needed to, get that hype and get people back on board, and just remind people it was happening. I think as well, like you say, from the psychology point from Tyson Fury, I think he needed it, because, like I say, I think he's already ready now to go, and I think he's going a little bit stale. And I think mentally, Tyson Fury's the type of guy, he does feed off the energy of the fight, this back and forth. And as we've seen, he's got none of this from Oleksandr Usyk, because he's an intelligent guy and he doesn't do all this trash talking. And I think it's just like the Eastern European way. It's just not what they do. So it's an interesting one why they've done it. But I definitely just felt in the press conference, I couldn't quite make him out, because he was being quite respectful. He seemed very nice. He was giving Oleksandr Usyk and also his manager a lot of credit. And, he was saying he was a nice guy. And I wasn't sure quite how to take it, because I feel as if Tyson Fury is a lot better, when he is trash talking and he gets himself fired up. And I'm not sure if that's like a worry or not, because, like I say, physically he's looking great. But I'm just a bit unsure where he is mentally right now.
I think he's struggling to work out an approach for Oleksandr Usyk. If you look at Tyson Fury's rapport and his relationship and his sort of just his sort of comings and goings with any of his opponents, right? It always differs, and it can even be the same opponent, but it will differ from press conference to press conference. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes he will be massively disrespectful about an opponent, and then the next time he sees them, he'll be cool with them and he'll pay them compliments. You know, I remember when he got matched up against Dillian White, and I was sort of eagerly anticipating their press conference. I remember thinking, right, these two, they're going to clash. Tyson Fury's going to be a bit witty for him. Dillian White's going to come with the sort of the sort of London roadman energy and whatnot, and stick it on Tyson Fury. And it was very nonchalant in the end, the way they dealt with each other. So I do think that Tyson Fury will always gauge what way is best to approach his opponent. And I think that this is
Yeah.
the first time in his career that it's just not working for him the way that it would. And I think that the easiest one to draw reference and comparison to here is Vladimir Klitschko, right? Because obviously, you know,
Yeah.
both guys Ukrainian, and I would say that with Vladimir Klitschko, right, when Tyson Fury was sort of trash talking him, and when Tyson Fury was belittling his achievements and down talking his legacy as a heavyweight champion, that did not sit well with Klitschko, and Klitschko was not
Yeah.
used to it either. You know, Klitschko was from
Nah.
an era where he was so dominant for 10 years that not only had no one even troubled him in the ring, no one had ever spoke to Klitschko like that. Whereas with Oleksandr Usyk, he's a bit more in touch with like the modern reality of boxing, and I feel like he's
Absolutely.
had to come up against guys in his career so far, maybe like a Tony Bellew, maybe like a Derek Chisora, who have tested him from that mental side of things. So Tyson Fury's not winding Usyk up the way that he was winding Klitschko up. But the only thing I would say to this is a lot of people will say to me now, oh, Tyson Fury's completely changed. You know, Tyson Fury doesn't fancy it of Usyk the way he did with Klitschko and Wilder because, you know, he's not doing the trash talking. And I do get that. I can completely understand that. What I would also say is, remember, you know, a boxing career is a short shelf life. You might get 20 years if you're really, really lucky, but even that, you know, it's a short shelf life, right? But when you think about Tyson Fury beating Klitschko, he was 26 years old, right? He's probably, 35 years old now, I would imagine, 34, 35 years old. It's the best part of a decade ago he beat Vladimir Klitschko. The build-up to that fight was the best part of a decade ago. Now, if I think about things that left my mouth and the things that I used to say when I was 20
Yeah.
compared to now being 29, God, I'd probably look back and cringe at a lot of the shit I used to say. So now when I look at things, I think, okay, maybe his approach has changed, and maybe that's an indication that he's feeling less confident or different about this fight. Or maybe it's been 9 years and he's just not that way anymore. So
He's evolved, hasn't he? He's not the same guy he was. Yeah, it's just like again, we're always trying to pick up on what we can take away. Essentially, I think this delay for Usyk may be more of a problem than for Tyson Fury because, as we've discussed, that it's probably been beneficial for Tyson Fury. But when we look at Alexander Usyk, the last 3-4 years, he's only been fighting once a year. So do you think this delay is going to affect him? Because I'm thinking, he's a true professional. So there's a massive part of my brain saying, it doesn't matter if this was another year's time. Mentally, he turns up, he does the job, and nothing affects him. But at the same time, this has been dragging out and dragging out. And I'm just curious to see what you think. Do you think this delay may have affected him?
I think so. I think that the delay will not have been ideal for Alexander Usyk at all. Like, if you actually look, I think in the past 5 years, I think if you look at the leading three heavyweights, I think it is Anthony Joshua has had something like 6 or 7 fights in 5 years. I think Tyson Fury has had about 5. And the man with the least is Usyk, who's only had about 4 in that time. Now, remember as well, you're transitioning from a cruiserweight to heavyweight. Any other weight jump, you might be jumping 4 to 8 pounds, maybe a stone at a massive, massive push. But here you're going all of a sudden into the land of the giants. And the other thing that no one speaks about here is we've got to remember, Usyk did not look great in his last fight. Now, it's against Daniel Dubois, and Daniel Dubois will give anyone problems. I'm sure if you stick Daniel Dubois in a ring with Tyson Fury, he will ask questions of Tyson Fury. And if you run the fight over 10, 20 times, I'm sure Daniel Dubois can pick up a win here and there, even though you'd make Fury a favourite. But what I'm saying is, Oleksandr Usyk was not the fleet-footed Usyk that we had seen in both Anthony Joshua fights in that fight against Daniel Dubois. He
Yeah,
looked like he had slowed down a little bit. Now,
yeah,
I could be having the wool pulled over my eyes here, and it could just actually be that he respected Anthony Joshua's sharpness and punch power a lot more than he respected Daniel Dubois, and therefore he opted to stand in front of Daniel Dubois a little bit more. But I was
yeah,
not massively impressed by Usyk in that fight. I didn't
yeah,
think that Usyk looked as good in that fight as he did in the Anthony Joshua fights, and therefore, if we're going on this whole "you're only as good as your last fight," then maybe we
yeah.
need to look at Oleksandr Usyk here and think this delay might have put way more of a spanner in the works for Usyk than we're even anticipating here.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting point. Going back to earlier on, we're talking about Tyson Fury saying a little guy doesn't beat a good big guy. Well, fairness to Alexander Usyk, he's dealt with Anthony Joshua, who's a big heavyweight. So straight away he's beaten a good big guy. He also beat Daniel Dubois, and you're saying the performance wasn't great. I think I agree, but I think in that fight, he wasn't really taking him quite as seriously as he did Anthony Joshua. I think he thought it was going to be a lot easier fight than what it was. And also, Daniel Dubois can really punch. So when he got in there with him, he probably felt his power. I think he was already in the mindset that I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try to hold my feet a little bit more and try and get the stoppage. And whichever way you look at it, he actually got the job done. He stopped Daniel Dubois. So you've got to give him credit for that, because it's not just like he had a bad performance and it went to points. Regardless how he performed, he actually stopped Daniel Dubois. So I've got to give him credit for that. So just when we're talking about a small guy beating a big guy, if you ask anybody about Daniel Dubois, people who sparred with Anthony Joshua, all these top heavyweights, Joe Joyce, people like that. There's several others, I can't think of all the names, but they all say he's probably one of the biggest punchers in the heavyweight division. So the fact that Alexander Usyk went in there and stopped him, and stood there and actually held his feet with such a big, powerful guy, I've actually got to give him a little bit of credit for the tactics that he actually went with, to be honest. And also, the simple fact is, the transition he's had from cruiserweight to heavyweight, it's been quite a fast one. I know it's been a few years now, but realistically, he hasn't had loads of fights, with, mediocre heavyweights and then started to go in there with the top guys. He's kind of pretty much went in there. He fought Derek Chisora, and then, I can't remember all of his fights, but I think he's went into the deep end pretty quickly. And, he's beaten everyone that's been put in front of him. So I give Alexander Usyk a lot of credit, but I do think he's at the stage in his career where I'm again, a bit like Tyson Fury, a bit like Anthony Joshua. These guys are all getting a little bit older now. There's only so many good years left in the career. And like I say, the delay, like when we talk about Alexander Usyk, the delay a few years ago, it probably wouldn't have been a problem, but he is getting older. And there's an argument that the fact that he's going from cruiserweight to heavyweight, that they're a little bit slower. So you can actually, in essence, heavyweights generally can go a lot older in terms of the career length, and that is because the pace isn't quite as fast. So you've got a little bit more time, and there's a lot. The power is a bigger importance at heavyweight than it is in the lighter weight. So, and there's so many different factors. But let me know, how do you think the fight plays out? Who do you think that wins, and how do you think the fight goes?
It's so hard. It's so hard to give a prediction because, like I said at the start of the video, I have no idea what actually happens in this fight. But like we always do as boxing fans, I've always got a little vague idea. And before I give my prediction, just to take it back to that preparation, I think that Tyson Fury would have had a much easier time preparing for Oleksandr Usyk than Oleksandr Usyk has had preparing for Tyson Fury. Now, this might sound really short-sighted of me, and it might make me sound a bit ignorant here, but I could probably list now 10 guys that you could get in for sparring that will prepare you for Oleksandr Usyk. I'm not saying those 10 guys are as good as Oleksandr Usyk, but I'm just saying they could prepare you for him. And probably, out of those 10 guys I would name, probably maybe only 2 of them would even be heavyweights, if I'm honest with you. I think you could be sparring light heavies and super middles while preparing for Oleksandr Usyk, if I'm honest with you. And that's not because I'm saying I don't rate his punch power or ability to take a punch or anything like that, but just the speed of foot more than anything. And then when I look at it and I go, okay, as much as you could possibly have a Jai Opetaia in there, Moses Atoma to prepare for Alexander Usyk, who does Usyk get to prepare for Tyson Fury? And that's the real tricky one, Straight away you might go, I mean, the guy I was about to name, I don't even know if he's still knocking about, but I just thought for some reason of like Ustinov, Hellenius would be one that you could get in there size-wise. But realistically, I don't know who you get to prepare for Tyson Fury, apart from one man who would be perfect prep maybe for Tyson Fury, and that's his cousin Huey. And I know they're not getting him in. So I think Oleksandr Usyk's prep for Tyson Fury is going to be really, really hard. I think that Tyson Fury will have all the advantages going into his favour here. He's going to have a size advantage. He's going to have a reach advantage. He is going to be the man that, in my opinion, has a better win on his resume at heavyweight. I understand Oleksandr Usyk's got the back-to-back wins against AJ, the win against Dubois, but for me, I try to not have any short-term bias in my thinking, and that's the way I approach this. And I would still say that a 10 years unbeaten Vladimir Klitschko, despite the fact he was coming towards the age he was a very, very impressive win. Despite what we've seen from Wilder taking losses since then, that first Wilder win was a very, very impressive win. So I think that Tyson Fury's got everything going in his favour coming into this fight in terms of who should be a betting favourite. But what we can't deny is, regardless of what you've done in the past, it's about the here and now, because that's what wins you fights. And the indications push towards us saying, well, the here and now would suggest that Oleksandr Usyk would be a favourite in this fight. I think that Tyson Fury comes out for this fight and he starts off by having a little bit of a chess match with Oleksandr Usyk. And I believe that people are going to be quite surprised at the fact that Tyson Fury does find the target a lot more than everyone else that's been in there with Usyk does, you know. I remember when Anthony Joshua would land jabs on Usyk and you'd hear almost a bit of a gasp from the crowd as if to say, oh, he's done it, he's hit him, because he's so hard to hit. But I actually think that you're maybe better off, especially if he is looking to come in and be light in this fight, and he'll never get anywhere near this light. But I think you're actually better off maybe looking at the Tony Bellew fight and having a look at how Tony Bellew was able to use that jab against Oleksandr Usyk, to be able to throw with him when he pushed forward against Tony Bellew. And I think that early doors, you might see something like that replicated from Tyson Fury. However, I do think there comes a point when the fight is too close for comfort and Tyson Fury's starting to look at the fight and he's starting to think, actually, do you know what? I'm not imposing myself as much as I would like to be. And I'm not satisfied that this man's gas tank is going to run dry anytime too soon. And that's when I think that you'll see Tyson Fury start to take more risks in the fight, because he wants it to be more concrete. He wants to be more secure in the fight. In doing so, I think we could see Tyson Fury get dropped. I also think we could see Tyson Fury maul Oleksandr Usyk and actually be able to pin him on the ropes. Because when I looked at Dubois, when I looked at Anthony Joshua, and when I looked at Derek Chisora, they all had moments when they did try and pin Oleksandr Usyk back on the ropes. All of them, by the way, maybe Chisora having the most success out of the three of them, ironically, but all of them were pretty much unsuccessful in doing so. But I did see enough there to think, if you're a bit better at doing it, I think you can do it to him. But I think you'll only see it done to Usyk when he's in with the elite of the elite. So I think that if I'm going to hedge if I was going to hedge my bets, I would hedge my bets towards Tyson Fury beating Usyk in this fight. I wouldn't go against it going to points either. I know a lot of people think that if it goes to points, it's Usyk's decision. I don't know. Sometimes a fight can go to points because, you know, one fighter doesn't get the other one out of there. So I wouldn't say it can't go to points. Honestly, it's fascinating. I'll pick Fury as a winner, but I'm not saying it with confidence. I'd love it to happen. I'm a big Tyson Fury fan, and I want to see the fight of him and Anthony Joshua. But,
you know, I've got about 10 different scenarios in my head of how the fight could potentially go. But just with you talking about, you know, the preparation, I'm not too sure if I feel as if it's harder to prepare for Tyson Fury of it is for Oleksandr Usyk, because what I do think is, and you know, you mentioned Tony Bellew also, he talks about the front foot pressure of Oleksandr Usyk, and you know, how tight he was in that fight. Although Tony Bellew had a lot of success against Oleksandr Usyk, he said, I think it was the 7th round, he said, I was absolutely exhausted. And I don't think Tyson Fury, and again, when you look at like the last 4 or 5 years, and who's fought the more elite guys. Because again, there's no good going back to all the way to against Klitschko, which was 10 years ago. You've got to look a little bit, in more recent years. I would say that Oleksandr Usyk's been fighting at a lot higher level. Yes, it's not always been at heavyweight, but just when we're talking about skill set, I think that Tyson Fury is going to struggle to find someone who moves like Oleksandr Usyk, because I just think his skill level is just like second to none. So I personally think it's a harder task to find someone like Usyk than it is to find someone like Tyson Fury. And I know like Tyson Fury's got a more unorthodox style, and he's a big guy, but I just think the skill level of Oleksandr Usyk is just so difficult. He's a southpaw. There's a lot of southpaws, but not many of them, box like Oleksandr Usyk. Even though, like I say, it's quite textbook, his patterns and his movement, the way, he's right in front of you at all times. He's got that ability to stand on the edge of range, just out of range, and he can hit you and just, pull away within fractions and then come back with a combination. I just think he's an absolute master at his craft. And I think, Tyson Fury is a great fighter, but the guys that he's been fighting, in my opinion, aren't elite guys like Derek Chisora, Wilder, absolute monster of a puncher, but technically not that great. Dylan White, tough guy, big puncher, hard as nails, but he's not that technical. I just think the level of technicality that he's going to be dealing with is going to be like nothing he's ever dealt with, because this thing of where everyone thinks that, Tyson Fury's going to be able to pin him down and stuff and maul him and stuff like that. I think it's possible. I think in moments he will be to do that, but I think it's a lot harder task than people realize, because he's a real master. He's so quick on his feet with his movement. He just gets himself out of these sticky moments. And I think the only thing with when Oleksandr Usyk fought Derek Chisora, he caught him at a good time. He caught him in a stage where, in camp he was trying to eat more calories, eating food. He was doing a lot of weight training, so his body was kind of adapting to the new weight and, the new types of training that he was doing. So his body wasn't really comfortable with the new weight. So at that point in time, Oleksandr Usyk probably wasn't as quick on his feet. He wasn't quite as mobile. So and again, Oleksandr was still getting used to being in there with the really big guys. And in fairness to Derek Chisora, he's a tough guy. He's happy to take one to give one. Well, he'll take two or three to give one. That's his style. So most of the guys that Oleksandr was fighting, weren't willing to just take shots. So there was a combination of things that made Oleksandr Usyk at that time not look as good. But I think now he's transitioned into this new weight. He's a lot better. His body's now comfortable, shifting the weight, being light on his feet still. And he's definitely carrying more power. We've seen that against Daniel Dubois. We're seeing that against Anthony Joshua, because when he hit Anthony Joshua early on in the fight, you could see with Anthony Joshua's face, he looked to say, whoa, that was a punch, was a lot harder than I was expecting. And I think it's also the accuracy of his punches, the volume of punches. I don't think Tyson Fury, other than probably Otto Wallen, is being in there with anyone who throws as many punches as Oleksandr Usyk. So I just think it's going to be hard for Tyson Fury to kind of prepare for it. So I do think early on in the fight, it is going to be a chess match. And, I'm hoping, I think this is going to be a great fight, but I think it may not catch fire quite like people think. Everyone's excited about it in the sense of, it's the undisputed title, but what could end up being in a bit of a mediocre fight, a bit of a chess match. And I think it'll be where after 6 rounds, I think that's when we're going to see where the tactics are going to go, because it's going to be a case of either, Alexander's tired because of the pressure that Fury's put on him, or again, the other way around, where the movement, the volume of punches, I think we're going to see Tyson Fury looking a little bit tired. And then I personally think it's going to be Tyson Fury that's going to be tired, because Oleksandr Usyk's a true professional. He's always in the gym. He's been preparing for this fight for a long time. And I just think mentally, he's a lot more, as we know, Tyson Fury's had his problems. I think he's more mentally stable. And I think he's just more mentally and physically prepared. So I don't think the fitness is going to be a problem for Oleksandr Usyk. And I just think on a technical level, I just can't see Tyson Fury dealing with him. I just really, really can't. So, I'm picking Oleksandr Usyk to beat him. That's just the way I see it. And I also think that Oleksandr Usyk hits hard enough, and, he's got enough accuracy to land enough shots. So, after 6 rounds, 7, 8 rounds, I think them punches will start to have an effect on Tyson Fury. And we're seeing him against Ngannou go over with just like a small left hook, not the shots that I've seen him take against Deontay Wilder. So, there's an argument that his resistance may not be what it once was. So I see a potential, I'm definitely picking Alexander Usyk. And I also think that Alexander Usyk might potentially stop Tyson Fury.
Do you know what, right? I remember not too long ago, last couple of years, thinking that Vasily Lomachenko would never be beat. I remember thinking there's no way this guy ever gets beat. He's just too good. And I thought the only thing that could possibly beat him is the weight, is maybe going up in weight. Against some of the guys that he went up in the weight against, he was faring well, and he won a world title and he did quite well. But despite the fact that, okay, say with Lomachenko, for example, I believe that he beat Devin Haney. I remember scoring that fight by 2 points to Lomachenko when I had sat down and scored it. But then, in the fight, I think it was before that, he had fought Teofimo Lopez and lost to Teofimo Lopez. And what I'm saying is, and this sounds disrespectful to Teofimo Lopez, I believe that the weight lost Lomachenko that fight. I don't believe if Teofimo Lopez and Lomachenko are the same size, same weight, and obviously they would have been in the ring, but, just naturally, I don't believe Teofimo Lopez can lace Lomachenko's boots, and I believe it was the weight that lost him that fight. But then I also believe that stylistically, you could have that extra weight, like a Devin Haney, who we know is about 160 pounds in the ring, and they're not able to impose that size. So I wouldn't say, and this is a stretch, and people are going to be saying in the comment section, he's a Fury fanboy, he's trying anything. I wouldn't say that the 2 wins over Anthony Joshua and the 1 win over Daniel Dubois, I wouldn't say that they solidify the fact that Usyk has adapted to heavyweight and Usyk can hang it with any of the heavyweights. I still think there's question marks about a heavyweight who is maybe a little bit more fleet-footed. And I could imagine if we were talking to Brian right now, if he was listening to this, he'd be screaming at his TV set or computer saying, he's not fleet-footed. He hasn't been fleet-footed in ages because, I've had conversations with Brian when he said to me, no, his feet have slowed down. I get that. But the indications that we're now seeing could suggest that if he's able to reverse nature and father time, his feet might still be good again. And then the weight factor could weigh heavier than it did in the Dubois fight and in the AJ fight. So for me, Usyk has nearly ticked that box of going, no, do you know what? The weight won't be an issue. But until he beats the Tyson Fury, I don't think I can tick that box. And it's the same as I was comparing with Vasily Lomachenko. Although the weight wasn't an issue going up to lightweight and 140, I think as high as he went in some of the fights, in some of them it was. So I just need to see this. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I believe that ultimately, I think that for all of us watching, whether it is what we had anticipated going in or whether it's something that surprises us on the night, I think there's going to be a moment in this fight for all of us watching when you go, how did we not realise it was going to go like this? And that moment could be Oleksandr Usyk outboxing Tyson Fury. It could be Tyson Fury mauling Alexander Usyk on the ropes, roughing him up and really imposing his size. And ultimately, none of us know until it happens. But I definitely think that moment happens. And I think that moment comes 2 rounds.
Yeah.
I would say within 2 rounds, we know how this fight's going.
Love it. This boxing's so fascinating. Because like you mentioned Lomachenko, I've studied him all the way through my amateur career. He also fought my mate Sam Maxwell when we're on GB and WSB.
Yeah, I know Sam Maxwell. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Lomachenko's an amazing fighter, and I actually think that Lomachenko is an even better fighter than Alexander Usyk. I just think, at the lighter weights, it's harder to transition up through the weights, and I think Lomachenko just when he was at that slightly heavier weight, he didn't quite have the punch power to have the same effect. Whereas Alexander Usyk, with his skill set, which is, again, amazing, he was able to carry that extra bit of power up through the weights. I think that's the difference. But, we could talk all day about this. This is why boxing and this fight is so fascinating, because I'm pretty sure we could have a conversation tomorrow and would probably have a slightly different take on the fight. I just think it's just so exciting and I just can't wait. And just for final predictions, give me exact prediction and round you think it's going to go. Do you think it's going to points, or do you think it's going to be a stoppage?
I'm going to go with a Tyson Fury points decision.
Points decision, okay. Well, I'm going for Oleksandr Usyk. And I'm thinking points, but I am thinking there's a potential stoppage. And I'm thinking somewhere around about 9 or 10. That's where I'm going for. But again, like we say, no doubt if we have this conversation again, it might have slightly changed. But
Do you know what I would say?
I can't wait for this fight.
Just before we finish on it, I would say that if I was to pick Oleksandr Usyk, the method I'd pick him by is by stoppage.
By stoppage, yeah. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, well, thank you very much, Joey, for joining me. If you haven't already followed Joey, make sure that you do, because, you know, his content's amazing. He's got the football. In fact, go on. I'll let you introduce your own channels.
Yeah, so I've got the Joey Knight podcast. Thank you, mate. I've got the Joey Knight podcast. That's all my Chelsea content, really. So if you're a Geordie, if you're a Newcastle fan, then you might want to watch that one, but plenty of Chelsea content on there. And then the Joey Knight boxing channel. So Joey Knight boxing on YouTube. That's where I'm recording all my bits. I've got bits and pieces I do to camera. I've got bits for me and Brian. Hopefully me and you will have some bits coming up that can go off there. So yeah, definitely head over there.
Yeah, and you need to watch out for him, because he's fighting in Misfits, and I predict that you're going to be the star in Misfits, because your skill set, you know, I think you're a level above the rest at the moment. So make sure you check him out, because I think he's going to be the next big thing.
Top man. Thanks
you, mate. Thanks again, mate. Appreciate it.
Top man. Cheers, Lazar.
Let me know what you think in the comment section. Please like and subscribe and go and watch this video next.